The next one's lift and fall. It's a bit like the Aussie style, but without the can, because it's a bit hard to do this with a can in your hand. You cast your jig out and it hits the bottom, you take up the slack line, and you do this. I tell you, it's better with a can. Okay, and it's just as effective, and I'll tell you why. Again, has anyone seen baitfish swimming like this? No? Prawns? Stuff squid eat? Does it swim like that? No, it doesn't. Okay, now again, the squid are going, what's that? And it's generally on one or two tentacles where you're catching that squid. And generally you're missing more squid than you're going to catch because you don't know that they're doing this. Okay? So what we want to do is teach, or not teach the jig, but make the jig look like food. And if I see something that looks like food and I'm hungry, I'm going to eat it. I don't care whose food it is, I'm eating it. I didn't get this way on Weight Watch, let me give you the tip. So we need to make that look like food. One of the ways to do that is with a technique called a rip and fall. So it's similar to the, what do I call it, lift and fall, where we cast our jig out, the jig hits the bottom. Actually, I'll pretend I'll cast this way so I don't smack anyone in the face. I'll take up that slack line, and I'm not going to exaggerate this, and then I'll lift. Okay, and then I'll take up some slack line, hit the bottom, again. And that's not an exaggeration, which is one reason why you need that strong backbone in that rod face. And it's another reason why I fish with 3 kilos of drag. And it's another reason why I fish with up to 20 pound line, because jigs are too expensive to throw away. When you do crank that hard, you'll snap line. Don't throw your jigs away, folks, fish heavier. I fish with 3 kilos of drag because if I do put that pressure, otherwise I'm just pulling line. I'm not moving the jig. Okay, and everything I want that tip to do, I want the jig to do, I want the tip to do for me. Okay? Now the reason why we lift like that, has anyone ever been for a swim before and you get too close to a flathead or something that's sort of sitting on the bottom? They shoot off in a million miles an hour and then they settle somewhere else, yeah? All of a sudden that jig's starting to look like food. If it looks like food, there's no more of, what's this? It's, there's lunch, bang. And where I've grabbed that, that's where the squid grab it too. They're not silly enough to grab the sharp and shiny part for us and do all the work for us. Which is why all the bite marks you'll get will be in the back. Okay, so they need to incapacitate that food as quick as they can so they can eat it. So they grab it here. And then they'll pull back. And you'll pull back a bit and you go, oh hang on, I don't like that. Don't put gentle pressure, and I'll get into that in a minute. So the idea is once that shoots off, let it sink against the line. Okay, don't let it sink on slack line. Because as that jig's sinking, as you felt before in your hand, there's a little bit of line tension. If a squid grabs that and doesn't pull, he might grab it and sink with the jig doing this, bite in the back of it. If you've got a little bit of tension and the lure's sinking against the line, you'll feel that in your hand. If you feel it in your hand, you'll catch that squid. Okay, so it's an important part of it. A lot of times squid will grab the jig and sink. We put a little tiny bit of pressure, and then there's nothing. And you go, it's just a bit of weed. 9 times out of 10 it's a squid that's grabbed a hold of it. You've put a little bit of pressure and you've gone, no thanks, I'm not interested anymore. Okay? So that's the rip and the fall.
So you've ripped the line up.
Yep.
Wound your slack line.
So I'll rip
and then
take my slack line and let it sink against it. So that's here's a reel. So what I excuse me, after I've gone rip, I'll generally throw my handle like that and it takes up the line as my hand goes down, and then the line stays tense against the jig as it sinks against the weight of the line. Okay? Oh, what am I doing? I need this now. The rip and crank. This is something I do probably most often, or the most common technique I use, and probably the most common technique used around the world. And one of the important functions you need to realise is that you need to turn the handle when you're doing this. Otherwise you're just looking like Harry Potter throwing a wand around and casting spells. You're not catching fish. Okay, because all you're doing is waving a heap of slack line around and causing a mess with your braid. So the idea is that as you lift, you crank. So when my hand goes down, handle comes up. rod goes up, handle goes down. It's pretty easy, like so, yeah? But not that gentle. So I'll cast it out. Sorry, mate. Once it hits the bottom, this hand's the most important one. I do this. Okay, now that causes the jig to do what? Shoot off the bottom first of all and start falling one way. I'll go whack, it'll go this way. I'll go whack, it'll go that way. What do baitfish do when they swim? They do this sort of stuff. And then they sort of stop, have a look around. Yeah. Then they'll shoot off again. Now it looks like food. So the squid are more often going to grab something that looks like food and want to eat it seriously. The the rip and crank, you don't have to do it a million times. You can do it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times in a set. Because if you keep returning the rod tip to the same place, you're only taking between 50 and 80 centimetres along with the 2500 size reel. So you're moving your jig 50 to 80 centimetres each time. Okay? So it's not coming up, it's working across. The burn. How many have been squid fishing before and you know there's squid there, but you've caught half a dozen squid and all of a sudden they just stop? The burn, squid are pretty stupid, but if you've pulled, you pulled a few squid out and the other squid is sitting around going, geez, what happened to Harry? Where's Ralph gone? Because I'm sure Trevor's there a minute ago. Oh, there he goes. All of a sudden his mates start disappearing. He doesn't know why they're disappearing, but he's going to shy off a bit and sit on the bottom and go, well, I'm not too sure about what's happening. So we'll cast our jig out, and on the top of the water, as soon as it lands, keep the rod tip high and just do this. You won't catch any squid. But what you will do is change the environment that squid's in. So as that squid travels along the water at the surface, it changes the light that refracts through the surface, yeah? And the squid come up and go, what the hell was that? Much the same as if you're at the traffic lights and you hear a screech, you turn your head and go, what was that? It's very similar. Now the squid have forgotten, because they're pretty stupid to remember, they haven't got a very functional brain. They've forgotten that Trevor and Ralph and Larry have disappeared, and they can just see food again on your next cast. So it's just changing the habit of the squid when he starts to shy off. Okay? Now, just as important as making it look like food is, as I said before, once the squid grab a jig, a 2 kilo squid can hold 12 kilos of pressure. They're quite sensitive critters. If you put a little bit of pressure, they're going to let go. Don't put a little bit of pressure, put lots. Because if I want to pull that jig so as it sets in the hardest part of the squid, the crown, not the tentacles, I need to change the way that that jig is now by pulling hard and doing what? Turning the jig. And setting where? The hardest part of the squid. Now I guarantee if you set your barbs into the head of it or the crown of the squid, you're not losing it. You can pick a 3.5 kilo squid up out of the water by the jig. Forget your net, you don't need it anymore. You only need a net if you don't set your hook properly. Okay, so setting hooks is important. Now I'm going to show you a little clip in a minute where one of my mates in Japan filmed, we filmed it with him when I was over there a little while ago. When you see how hard he sets a hook, you'll understand that squid aren't as delicate and as sensitive as you like to think they are. You're not going to pull the heads off. I've tried, and it just doesn't happen. Okay? This is the hando. You will have to excuse his acting. I think he thought we were filming for a Hollywood movie or something at one stage. He does get a bit carried away. So that's that rip and crank. You can hear the line coming back onto the reel. The rod returns to the same place every time. Do it again. So it's not gentle, it's actually quite aggressive. Now when he sets a hook, go on. So no mucking around. The squid's still attached, he's not pulled the head off, he hasn't pulled any tentacles off, but he's got a good hook up into the most solid and hardest part of the squid. This is terrible action, sorry. I'm not going to bother translating, I'd just be lying. Something like that. He was saying how good looking I was then, I promise. Something else you'll find interesting with this video too is the Japs don't just kill and grill everything. They do let a lot of stuff go. Hando, I know, releases about 40% of his squid. I release all of mine, but unless I'm killing it for fisheries. So he's just going to pick this thing straight up out of the net, and as you can see, it's a solid hookup, and he really belted into that squid. So don't be afraid to set your hooks and set them hard.
So is that the same type of squid as we have?
Identical except for the shape of the hook. That's a northern calamari.
That's a little,
Yeah.
double.
They've got a round hook, ours are a triangle. Yeah. But if you were to cut them open and butterfly them, they're identical. There's no difference at all. Now this is probably more how I fish, a bit more aggressive. But you can sort of understand now why you need the power in the base of that rod and why you're getting that jig to dart so aggressively and so fast. So,
Couldn't do that in shallow water.
absolutely. I do it in less than a metre. Because the first lift is only lifting the jig about that far. Then I'm only winding to the same place. I'm only taking 50 centimetres each way. It's that acting. Sorry about the acting, folks. It's terrible. This is a jig we worked on a few years ago, just testing some colours. Now he set that pretty hard, but he's picked up 4 tentacles. It didn't pull them out. They're stronger than we give them credit for. So the whole idea of fishing with a light drag and a nice, soft, gentle rod, so you don't pull the barbs out, we just proved that that's bullshit right there and then. Okay, they're tough. This is a bit bigger, this squid, so it'll also go to show that if there's a lot more weight at the end of the line when you do set your hook, you're still not pulling your barbs out, you're setting them quite low. And again, belt into them, don't be gentle. If you feel a bit of pressure, belt into it. It's terrible, the acting shocking.
今、ラインが走ったの見えました。
This is the guy who designs most of Daya's jigs. So it's a bit bigger, but you can see where the jig is. It's not hanging off one candle or 2 candles. It's well and truly set in the ground of the squid.
はい、ありがとうございます。
That means thank you, I know that much.
2キロぐらいですね。
So this isn't the biggest squid in the world, but it's a reasonable squid. He hangs it on a scale and it comes to 3 kilos.
2キロあるかもしれない、もしかしたら。ちゃんとゼロですから。ちょうど
So
2 キ
he's
ロで
on
す。
3 kilos. So he's fishing with 3 kilos of drag on a 3 kilo squid, and he's belting the hell out of it when he sets his hook. It didn't fall off. Now once you start setting hooks, you're going to lose a lot less squid. Because when you don't set a hook and you feel that little bit of pressure and a squid lets go, occasionally you'll still catch that squid, but again, because he's let go, it's going to be where? On 1 or 2 of those long tentacles. Then you start reaching for nets and you start worrying you're going to lose a squid. So you start fishing ultra gentle and trying not to upset the squid. But if you set your hooks properly from the start, belt into them, don't be shy, you'll land lots more squid. And if you fish with a little bit of line tension, you'll feel the bite of much more squid. Now if you're fishing with slack line, I guarantee you, you're losing lots of squid that you didn't know existed. Because you're confusing the bottom and a bit of weed with the pressure of a squid by just going gentle. Okay, so belt into them, don't be shy.